welcome to Upstage Downstage, with him, Richard Platt, seated in the upper circle.
And him, Stephen Rees, typically seated in the cheap seat.
This is the Theatre Podcast, where we discuss productions we've seen,
Things we've liked,
and may not have liked,
giving our complete unprofessional
and non-biased opinions.
So grab a brew,
Take a seat,
and let's raise that curtain. On today's episode, we'll be discussing Rebus, a game called Malice. We saw this production at the Queen's Theatre, Hornchurch on the 4th of February 2023. This world premiere of Rebus, a game called Malice is the next instalment of the Inspector Rebus series. Written for the stage by Ian Rankin and Simon Reed, this was a Queen's Theatre, Hornchurch production in association with Daniel Schumann and Lee Dean. So Stephen, what's it all about?
A splendid dinner party concludes with a game created by the hostess. A murder in a stately home needs to be solved. Suspects, clues and red herrings await, but the dinner party guests have secrets of their own, threatened by the very game they are playing. Amongst them is Inspector John Rebus. True crime is his calling. Is he playing an alternative game where only he knows the rules?
But first, our post-show opinion!
I was more bothered about who didn't do it than who did.
A game you just didn't want to play.
So with all that said, let's
Set the scene. So Richard, let's talk about this play, which we were kindly invited down to the Queen's Theatre, Hornchurch, to view this first outing for this stage play by Ian Rankin and Simon Reed.
Yeah.
Where do we start? With the direction? Or let's just talk about the set. Where do we start? With the set?
Yeah, so when you walk into
you're describing it then, are you?
Well, you can describe it if you want to. You can see it. Go on. Your turn.
Oh, okay. I'll give it a go. I'm not very good with the description.
I'm just going to drink my tea.
Pardon? What? Overly dramatic? I don't think so. Anyway, carry on. So we have a manor house. It's a manor house, but it is... oh, God, it's like give us a clue. It's a manor house, but it's in like a lounge setting, but it has a dining table as well, though technically they probably would have had that in a separate room, but this is all one room. And
it's set in Scotland, isn't it, in Edinburgh?
Well, yes, it is that.
But you wouldn't really know that from the actual...
There's no elements, so there's no stereotypical Scottish thing in a manor house.
It's only when you were told that...
Exactly.
Through conversation.
Which is actually quite a good point to make. Anyway, back to setting the scene. Technically speaking, the whole backdrop is black, littered with a load of paintings with lamps just above them to light up the paintings. And there's two columns either side of the staging, which would be the pillars, I suppose, of a manor wall. Then we've got three strikingly tall archways. Well, they're not really archways, but they're features of doors. So you've got one door exiting on stage right and one exiting stage left. And the central column is that of just a bookcase embedded in an alcove. Is it an alcove?
Yeah, it's an alcove.
An alcove.
It almost looks like where a fireplace would have been or something like that. It's very similar.
Yeah, but it's got like where they have the drinks dispenser there and the CD, and that's at the back. And to the forefront, as I said, there was like a sofa, a couple of chairs dotted about, and a dining table to the stage left with the sofa on stage right. With the basic lamps dotted about, I think there's, 4 lamps at the edge of the wall up on like pillars.
I mean, they can't have any worry about their electric bill with the amount of lamps on stage, to be fair.
No, but it has, for such quite a lavish big room for a set. It's the tiniest chandelier.
Yes.
I'm not sure I follow this set. I think it's a bit discombobulated. It doesn't really relate to the story as it progresses. You know, like you were saying about it being set in Scotland.
Yeah.
So why do we have nothing relatable to Scotland there?
Yeah, there was nothing obvious that was Scottish or in a style of a manor house or a well-to-do town as in Edinburgh. You couldn't pick up on those references, maybe. One thing that we saw was the pictures were actually on the black areas, which were...
Oh, yeah, did I not say that?
They were floating, almost, so it felt like...
Yeah, it made it appear like they were floating.
It made them appear like they were floating, but there was also obvious almost exits because they were on black flats, so they're only half hung on black flats, which I thought was quite clever, and I thought it would be be something that would be used.
Yes,
and
at the start I thought it was quite clever.
There was quite a bit of intrigue. We didn't.
Yeah,
it gave
because
you a
I
little
thought
bit of.
it's got potential here for doing something different
For
with
misdemeanors.
paintings and
I think as well,
out.
I can probably see why they've set it like this, because it's all about the play rather than the actual backdrop, as it were. But you could tell that it could be a portable set if they moved it somewhere else.
But you can have a portable set without the black backdrop.
Yeah, of course you can.
It just looks like this is done on a budget. I think there's a disconnect between the style and the intent to what's gone on with the stage.
Yeah, and I think the modern references, like the CD player and things, there's not actually many modern references. There's just a CD player at the back.
And also, everything that's on that stage needs to be used, and there's got to be a reason why it's used.
Yep.
For things later on, we'll explain more, but just for this little info drop here, they played a CD, a bit of music, but it didn't last that long. It was barely there, so there was no point at all of having that there.
And if we struggled to hear it, I don't know how the people at the back row would have heard it, because it wasn't that loud. It was very incidental. It wasn't actually used much.
But on the whole, the furniture-wise was appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, the whole look of the set, it all tied into each other. It all looked right. For
me, I disagree.
What I mean is...
knowing now, I think they shouldn't have bothered with all the paintings on the black. That should have just been one wall that had wallpaper that matched ivory-coloured pillars and walls with the doors and the architrave. But saying that, it wasn't my choice. So.
And this, just to mention, that the set was very close to the audience, as in it probably only used a third of the stage, really.
Do we actually know what it's like? Because we've never been there before.
But the actual staging dimension, I have seen them, and it does go back quite a way. I do feel like they pushed it forward on purpose, but that led you to believe there was more going to happen because of the space they would have behind that. And I think this didn't feel...
In that way, with it being pushed forward, it gave a more intimate setting. I'm going to say immersive, but it's not immersive at all. I do think more could have been done in terms of how it was staged. It felt very old-fashioned. My original thought after watching this play, in fact, even by the interval, I thought this was very much like a modern take of J.B. Priestley's Dangerous Corner. It felt like people were moving around to say a word for no reason other than awkward blocking. Like, I've got a big speech, this is a very chatty scene, so I have to move somewhere else. And Emma Noakes as Candida Jones, on some cases, simply moved up from the dinner table whilst having a conversation, but she went to sit at another chair that was positioned at the end of the stage, up against a lamp and pillar, to carry on that conversation whilst on the phone, and it just felt ever so awkward and odd.
It felt almost subtle but staged. It was like...
Well, it was very much staged, because if you're going to be in a conversation, then you turn to face the people and have that conversation.
Yeah.
But I get it, okay, she was on the phone, but to go and sit purposefully on a hard chair instead of
almost
people
faced the
lounge,
audience, and was even that chair felt separate to the actual performance, because it was a bit out on a limb, and it was facing the audience almost, and it just felt a little bit like you wouldn't have really put a chair there, because...
Well, if you're going to retire from the dinner table, then you'll go to the lounge.
Exactly.
Or the sofa.
Yeah.
In this case, there were no lounge chairs, there were just more dinner tables.
You wouldn't really sit at a chair that was completely separate to everywhere else.
So that looked awkward.
I got a problem with the blocking of it from a directing point of view. It seemed to just, like you say, a little bit
amateurish.
It was like one move here or one move there, a little bit like we've seen in Marigold Hotel. You know, the very one stands forward and talks, then the next one does. It was almost like we're in a rehearsal room and we're all taking our turns throwing a ball, and it just
nothing felt natural about it.
It didn't feel interactive when you're in
but I can understand it if these people didn't feel like they're familiar with each other.
The thing is, you start the production halfway through their evening. You don't see them meet, so there's no sense of awkwardness.
And they've
already
on the alcohol,
met,
so there would have been a lot more.
And they've already had their dinner. They've already had the meal. There was a lot of moments of. I suppose I said enough in that bit, didn't I?
There are other elements of the directing which slightly annoyed me, and I think it was a stylistic choice, where the constant use of the mobile phone, which happened to have been quite a few times, but particularly with the character of Candida, because she was a young influencer. Everyone gathered around her phone to react to what was going on to her screen, so we saw their reaction, but we never actually got, as an audience, to see what they were watching. No. So again, it secluded us from the action, and neither did it bring the outside world and the action going off out there into the stage. We just saw or heard of it secondhand. Whereas what could have been useful and would have been probably better was if, when they were replaying what was going on the mobile phone, we saw a video file being played out in the picture frame on the back of the stage, which they have full of all these other paintings.
Yeah.
So they could have just dimmed the lights a little of the other paintings so we could focus in on one particular screen, which was basically we're seeing what they're seeing. And that could have added an extra dimension and element
and
to the actual play.
It could have even moved around the screens. It could have been more than one picture, so that it actually moved around to give a bit of focus on something else that was happening, and also draw into the other uses of the mobile phones later on, which we'll discuss in the writing of it. And I totally agree with you. I think it would have helped just visualise that, because you can tell stories by what people say or the story that they talk about, but sometimes you do need the visuals in this type of production to make that outside world come inside, and I think that's the
I think it
thing.
stems down to not having a vision of the actual piece and what the point or purpose of this was. Okay, fine to entertain or be a whodunit, for example, but it was just jarring on a lot of levels.
It makes you wonder if it was only written to a point where there wasn't much room for any interpretation further than that, or how much,
This is why I say about it being slightly the dangerous corner situation. It's as if you've just thrown them a mobile phone and updated it. That's how it felt. Some of the other aspects of the directing would still, I suppose, be in that same vein of awkwardness. When they discovered a body was upstairs, there wasn't much of a reaction from the cast either.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Like, was the body upstairs? I don't know if I've just watched far too much soaps over the years or whatever, but you go out to the door and see it. And instead of just being, okay, we've got to be contained. I mean, this will come down to the writing, but we've got to stay in this room because we're not allowed out. But there's no conflict there. Oh, we're moving on to the writing now. I can feel it. But do you know what I mean? There's, even in the direction, there was none. The characters should have wanted to go and have a look.
I think but it's not just that. It was the whole point of a murder mystery is there's a reveal and there's shock, and I feel like there was no shock. There was hardly any reaction. It was like, oh, we've seen a dead body before. It felt like, oh, and it wasn't like yes and in an whole improv thing. It was more and. Yeah, it was just like
it just the reaction.
It just felt like the whole point of this production was to build up in the first half all the little intricacies of the stories, but if they feel that it felt that it was too subtle to actually have an impact when there's a dead body. Oh, okay. It almost felt like they'd said, oh, somebody's died down the street. Do you remember him? No, not really. It didn't have that impact that it should have done.
I think we ought to move along to the writing then, because I feel like that is naturally where we're headed now with our comments.
Yeah.
So you'd imagine that with this being written by Ian Rankin, that it would have been a lot more interesting, a lot more, well, have at least have more twists and turns and be more suspenseful. And I suppose what I felt was I never really cared.
No.
And I don't think the characters themselves even cared.
But it almost felt like this was written like almost a short story because maybe he couldn't find anything to put in the book to make it a whole entire novel that he'd normally write. I think this felt like one of those storylines or plots that he may have had written down and thought, I like this one, but I don't know how far I can go with it, maybe. And then let's turn it into a play. But it feels rushed. There's not enough intrigue to see a lot of plot lines or things that it doesn't leave you thinking or guessing. The script doesn't.
When we were watching it, I did feel it was a slow burn, especially the first act, and I was very surprised when it stopped after the first act because I thought that was the first scene.
Yes,
that's how much of a slow burn it was. Nothing much happened.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a lot of talk where it didn't really evolve.
I think for me it opened with a bit of promise and the way it was written, as in the John Rebus character came out, broke in to talk to the audience about setting up his character, but then I felt that was lost.
No, and what did he say? Something about reading a room.
Yes,
it was about reading
a room and controlling it and playing a game. And it was almost like you expected him to then keep stopping the production to then start playing and twisting things. And unfortunately, you never saw that again, really.
Yeah, he could have been playing a game of chess and moving the people about and making them believe different things at different aspects of the game.
Because at first I thought that's where it was going to go, and it didn't.
But it wasn't. The idea was that the character of Stephanie Jeffries, she was playing the game that Harriet Goodwin had created, and it was
a proper old school murder mystery by paper, on paper, wasn't it?
From what I can gather, Harriet Goodwin decided to write this piece as a game to sort out her marriage with Paul Godwin because she couldn't really tell him things about their relationship. She wrote it down in this game of a murder mystery and invited friends around to solve it. And that's when he discovered there was a lack of communication or something within there. I cannot remember the point of that.
No,
so that's why I'm a little bit hazy
there.
That's
the first half. It was always like.
Well, I mean, it did continue into the second half with the resolve of that. But it was only Stephanie that was sat trying to work out the clues for this game.
Yeah.
Everyone else were banging on about something else.
Or their own storylines that weren't relevant to the room, in a way. And
from the poster, it said about all these characters have a backstory that are coming out from this game.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel like it was coming out naturally whilst they were all playing this game. It felt like she was playing the game and they were talking about it, not really happening. Yeah, not really being involved with that. And it was just slightly jarring at all times.
I think none of the storylines really captured or captivated you to go, oh, it could be this person or it could be that person. Because the murder in case of the actual production wasn't actually strong enough to have many links to anybody in the room. And I think that was really weird.
I think the issue here is we're watching people play a game of a murder mystery. Where there's nothing at stake here.
No.
It wasn't until they discovered the dead body where you've got your inciting incident, shall we say, that, who is it? Who did it?
Yeah.
That's where your action is. That's what's happening. This game, why should anybody care about a game? It's just a game.
Exactly.
And yes, of course, it's a game called Malice. I was going to say Alice. If they'd have mirrored the game with
what was happening in the
room, and they could have linked it where one of the clue turns out to be the murder weapon for the actual person that has actually died in the room.
Exactly.
Like a premonition sort of a thing. That could have been more interesting and engaging.
Yeah, definitely.
Because then the red herring could have then been Harriet Goodwin having written it. Did she set it up? Is she the mastermind?
Yeah, exactly. Or is she still alive? Because that was the other thing.
Well, she's alive because she was there, wasn't she?
Yeah. Yeah, but it could have been a complete master plan written about all their lives, and also, it could have been twisted. And
who actually died? Was it?
It was the private investigator that had
so
paid.
It wasn't the chef.
No, it paid. This is where I was going to come in on this one.
Confusing,
there was a chef mentioned throughout the whole first half.
That's right.
Which we never met. Who was never on stage, and then it wasn't. We thought, is this chef being built up as somebody who's going to get murdered? Mm. But personally, somebody in the room should have disappeared because that would have been a better murder mystery because you'd have interacted with that person and then suddenly they're dead.
Felt their loss.
Yeah, but whereas we found that there was a chef that had made the meal that they'd just eaten, which we never met, never saw.
We never saw
on
much
a
of the
screen.
food. I think was it just one person
there was
plate?
There was just a bottle of wine, I think, left on the table.
Yeah.
Also, the person that died was a private investigator that had paid off the chef to get in the building, which it really felt so confusing because it was like, what the hell's the private investigator got to do with anybody in the room, really, apart from some people's weak links to
very weak
links, whereas there was enough drama going off on stage that they could have used it and made it stronger within the room to make it more of a Big Brother pressure cooker type of situation where it's actually locked away in this one room. And I think that was the problem. We were talking about things on the outside, but those things on the outside never link it, really.
And the whole setup, I don't think existed. I can't think of the setup other than the line of Rebus claiming to read the room. It never really came into anything. Now, if you just think we saw the mousetrap, same principle. Manor house, somebody dies, everybody comes in. Now, the setup was there's a murderer on the loose from the radio and wearing such and such and such and such, and they all come in. Every single one of them wearing a hat, a scarf, and a rain jacket, basically. So everyone already set up to be a suspect for the whodunit. Whereas this one, because the murder took place in the second act. Well, okay.
No,
say,
it's the first act.
No. You could say it was building up for the second act because we just discovered the body before it was curtained down. But it was basically that whole segment was the second act.
Yeah, exactly.
The game was the first one.
Yeah.
But then what are you doing for the rest of the play?
Well, exactly. I mean, one thing I'd like to say is it's not a technical thing, but we never heard a dead body hit the floor, and they were meant to have fallen down in the bathroom and died. We never heard a thud. No. So as far as we're concerned, nothing happened. Because, I mean, they could have even thrown a box in the air to make it sound like somebody had hit the deck.
The thing is, we were led to believe, even the characters in the room were led to believe that the chef or whoever was impersonating the chef or whoever it was had died.
Yeah, exactly.
And yet, not one of them decided to go and see who it was.
No, exactly.
Because someone took a picture on the phone. Oh, yes, that's him. That must be him. Well, how can you be sure?
Exactly.
And I'm slightly disappointed that Ian Rankin hasn't thought about this, because you need to make sure, if you're writing a murder mystery or whatever, that all these clues is valid.
And I think
Do you know what I mean?
Like, it's not just that. It's like you talk.
You'd have to go and see the body to make sure it is dead before you cross it off your list. Say,
but it's like you talking about Mousetrap. In this, I felt there was no intention to murder.
No,
there was no vested interest for anybody in that room to murder the person that died. There was no like, oh, it could be that, and it could be that. You didn't feel like you were trying to follow the storylines to try and piece it together.
Yeah, and that's where this is slightly weak, because in the resolve, you have a backstory and a reason why that particular person was doing what they did and why that person died. In this, all we got is, the investigator, whoever it was that was upstairs, slipped in the bathroom after somebody else took a shower and bashed his head and died, and that's why he was dead.
Yeah, so there's no intent of murder.
That's wrong. No,
there was no intent of murder.
No,
because it wasn't a murder.
So we've been going on this journey of trying to find out who killed this person when he wasn't killed at all. But it was just, actually, I found out why he just slipped.
But also, nobody in the room knew that person was in the building.
No.
So how could they intend to murder him if he wasn't? They didn't even know he was there.
And I thought it was a Freudian slip where one of them said at the very beginning he was found on the bed, covered in blood, dead, and then all of a sudden the next thing he said was he was on the floor in the bathroom. I thought something was made up of that, unless that was just an actor's slip of the tongue. Not quite sure.
And I think this is where Rebus comes out to talk to the audience and says that he's going to control the room. It felt such a thrown away part, because that could have been used so much more to see the twists and the turns. And it was just thrown away because he came out at the end after the whole production happened and stood and talked to the audience, and you thought it was such a waste. It felt like
the trouble is there was nothing at stake.
No,
for the hero, there was nothing at stake for the whole of them. Each one of them, there was nothing. Even though they had these secrets that were revealed, there wasn't necessarily anything at stake as such, which was worth bothering about.
No, it felt lackluster, and I suppose we're talking about the writing now. I suppose.
Oh yeah, we moved on to that hours ago.
And I think I felt it was almost underwritten.
I definitely felt that. The thing is, writing or playwriting is stagecraft. It's a craft within itself.
Totally.
It's not like writing a novel.
No, it isn't.
But you'd think that writing a novel where you can go anywhere you like, you'd understand that you can do the exact same thing in the stage.
Yeah.
However, this was done as a closed room. Yeah. But when you are in a static place, a small room, what you do, you bring the outside world inside.
Always.
So this is why, even though you have your mobile phones, what technical way can you do to make sure that that's visually stunning?
Exactly.
So you can write it that you see what's happening.
Definitely.
And why is it important that you see what's happening as well?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the way I felt was you're learning about storylines, because when you write a book, you can almost flesh it out a lot more onto everybody's individual storylines, and I felt like we spent a lot of time on knowing who each individual was.
That's it. In a novel, you're told their thoughts and feelings, whereas on the stage, you got to show.
You can see them. There wasn't much tension. There wasn't much upset between them all. You could see little things where
there was no conflict.
There was hands-on. There was one moment where
it was Paul Goodwin, Forbes Mason, to put his hand on Candida Jones.
That's it. That was the moment.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, and that could have gone further. That one little moment that you were meant to pick up on and go, oh, there could be a chance for a murder there because he could go missing, and then it was gone. That was it.
Or she could go missing and be
Yeah.
unrequited.
I just felt like everything felt a little unfinished. It didn't feel
Maybe
followed
there was just
through.
too many red herrings and nothing going on.
Yeah, everything was a red herring.
I tell you what is annoying and is red, the fact that she was basically Miss Scarlet in red. This is
Totally.
Cluedo.
Exactly.
Even Stephanie was dressed like Mrs. Peacock.
Yeah, and you've got Professor
And
Plum.
Harriet Goodwin was dressed in, I think it was green.
Yeah, it just felt cliched in the...
It did, didn't it?
You know, there's more intrigue in a Midsummer Murders episode because of who did what, when, and who could it have been than this, really. I felt
This could have been even darker.
You could have.
When you write it in this setting, you're up against the mousetrap. You're up against Cluedo. At the end of the day, those two great big pillars of comedy and suspense and mystery and whodunit.
But I felt like John Rebus, if he'd have come out to move the storyline along as a sort of narrator, periodically through each half, moved it from, say, I don't know, 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock in that
Played
evening.
with time, yes.
Played with time, so you'd have seen it go from them just having the niceties to almost all falling out, but get worse progressively.
That would have spiced it up a great deal.
It would have been so much more poignant and so much more intriguing.
Yeah, I assume that's what he was going to do, though.
Well, that's what I thought.
We had a little bit of a thing between him and Stephanie.
Yeah.
But she was into somebody else, and I've not read all of the books, so I can't remember whereabouts this is chronologically, but I'm guessing it's at the end, I feel.
However, I'll be honest.
Even that, for someone new going in, what was the point in any of it?
Because obviously Rebus showed a picture of the dead body to the people in the room. We
again.
never saw it, so we
No.
didn't know what it was, who it was, or anything. There wasn't even a moment where one of them could have reacted that they were related to them, or it was somebody that there was a love affair with.
Did
or
they shed a tear?
It didn't feel like
Did they
it was a
bother?
reaction. It was like, oh, somebody's died, and it was like
And
was
did
that
any of them,
subtle.
Did any of them ask, "Oh, we need to call the police," or was it just more like
Rebus called the police,
So
but there was
he
no
took
panic.
everything on, but only he could allow to see it because he'd left the force since anyway. It was all in his hands. All these characters left it for him to deal with everything. So there was no real pushback against anything, even if it was along the whole gambling situation. Was it gambling in this one?
Yeah, it was.
one of them
Yeah,
doing
it was
gambling.
gambling. Yeah, it was
money,
gambling.
and
Embezzlement,
selling
yeah.
the paintings and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Even the issue with the paintings and the fact that they were replacing the originals and selling the forgeries. I just keep thinking of the Fallen Madonna with the big boobies. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
But even this, that isn't a lower low, this is taken seriously. Not a lot was made of that.
No.
Because you had far too many paintings all over the place. If they'd have simpled it down and only had a few special quality ones or something like that.
Exactly. It felt like everything was almost bubbling under rather than bubbling over.
I think you're being a bit too polite by saying bubbling. I don't think anything was bubbling at all. It was barely on the simmer.
Yeah, well, true. Yeah, no, you're right.
Even the first act, I just thought that was just a really long first scene. And I was prepared to forgive it for being a really long first scene because it was setting the scene with it being supposed to be a game and they're giving the backstory of everybody and then that's it.
It overset the scene. You'd lost interest in a way. There
was
wasn't even a misdirect.
Inventiveness with the stage, not just with the stage, with the artistry of playwriting. I should say that.
No, I get that.
I think. But again, talking about the underpinning of everything, which was the character, Rebus, what was the point of him? Apart from it
being a retired inspector.
Being known. It wasn't like the inspector in Mousetrap getting involved.
No, it wasn't.
It was just taking the back seat, whinging on.
Exactly.
That's what it felt like to me.
He did. And I think because we didn't see him more, we only saw him at the end of the first half and the start of the second talk to the audience.
No, we saw him at the beginning.
No, that's what I mean, at the start of the first half.
I'm sure he said something in the middle. But it
wasn't much, it wasn't enough.
Exactly, but it wasn't where it twisted anything around.
No, it didn't. He didn't put a spin on it that made you think, oh,
it wasn't even enough to support the action carrying on out in that scene either.
I just question the way it was written, almost in isolation from will it work with an audience and will it actually...
It was a bit predictable as well.
Yeah, and you almost expect more when it's built up with a famous crime writer almost. It's like you sort of think it could go there and it didn't.
I think the twists and turns were meant to be as exciting as something that he might have written in one of his books. However, the twists and turns were basically the person slipped and died, so no one actually murdered anybody.
Yeah, and
it was all part of the game, and the game was what they were playing.
But with a game, you need motive for more than just that.
It should have been a game within a game.
It should have, and it wasn't.
It just makes me think of Saw, the films. You know, all the twists and turns.
Yeah.
That those kind of films.
Yeah, right
conjure
to
up,
the
and
end.
they're
Something
thrillers.
twists right at the end.
Yeah.
And everything changes in front of you.
You think your heroine's a person tied to a radiator, and actually it's a person who's got them there in the first place, or whatever. You know,
that's when you're shocked. That's when you sit there and go, I could never see this again, but it's made me sit up and think, and it's blown my mind. I think the poster, the description, a game called Malice, you expect some sort of playing with an idea or a, you know,
well, that
you
Rebus
expect
could
so
have been
much.
like the Saw character, where he could have got his closest, nearest and dearest, or people that he knew, because he knew their secrets and he wanted them to reveal themselves.
Yeah.
Only the game could have gone a bit awry when he did this murder mystery for them instead of her writing it. So they're trying to solve his game when an actual murder happens themselves.
But it could even have been that
and someone's
Rebus...
playing a game on him.
It could even have been that Rebus did the deed.
Could have been.
You know, because they could have even gone a massive flip side, and he could have been playing them all the way through to actually divert the fact that he did it, you know. But it didn't feel like that. I think they missed the mark on, because then that would have been shocking. Because then that would have been somebody that had been through it all his life and seen so many other murders that you never know. They could turn to do it themselves.
It was very underwritten and unimaginative.
And I mean, I suppose we want to say it was an hour and a half production split into two with an interval. 2 45-minute halves. It's not that length is important with productions, but content in that length is.
Yes.
And I feel that there was a lot of wasted minutes, really. I mean,
well, the first half, they could have been playing that game.
Yeah.
We had the other characters setting up their backstory.
Yeah.
Those backstories could have been interwoven.
Of course it could.
With their characters whilst they were playing and interacting with the game to begin
exactly.
with.
Yeah.
Or we could have found them out later and later in Act 2.
Exactly.
With people being secretive and
I mean, one thing
like
I'd probably say in this time is, we mentioned Dangerous Corner and stuff like that. Dangerous Corner set sort of a long time, 1930s. This felt like a 1930s production with a mobile phone.
Yeah.
The only thing that modernised it was a mobile phone and a CD player. It didn't actually
and even
bring
the CD
it up
player,
to
like
date.
I said, didn't get used.
No, it was
they were
just
going
there.
to have a bit of a dance. They put some music on, and then that was it.
Yeah,
Replace that CD player with a gramophone, and you got a Dangerous Corner.
And yeah, exactly. And the mobile phone could have just
have
been
a picture,
letters or telegrams that had come through the door. It didn't feel like it had been.
All you needed there was, like, Rebus was basically Robert Kaplan going around asking about the cigarette box.
Exactly.
That's all it was.
And also, to put it into perspective, how many people in that setting, because everybody's got mobile phones now, how many people would have sat there and played games like that in that way? They could have added more to it and made it more modern, and had too many distractions. There could have been fallouts on the phones. They could have had phone calls. You know, halfway towards it being a modern production rather than the full way. I think the time period was confused.
They could have even all rushed up there, all took a picture on their mobile phones, all come down here to discuss it. Meanwhile, all the pictures on the backdrop could have been at different angles of this body, and they're trying to say, well, and there could be a discrepancy as to, well, why is there a spanner or something in my picture and there's not one in yours?
Exactly. And the thing is,
where did that move from?
We're living in a world where people take photos of car crashes.
Yeah.
And it felt like there wasn't those elements of...
Well, we certainly saw a car crash.
Yeah, we did. Maybe. I think, well, but there was no body really. There was no motive for the car crash.
No.
Moving on to our next segment, as we say, we're
here
for the drama.
Oh, Richard, let's talk about the acting now. I feel like we've kind of ripped apart the directing and the writing, and we need to try and be positive. Yeah. Well, not try to be positive, like there's a gun to our head.
No.
But let's praise what there is to be praised about, and I feel that stems down to the acting.
Yeah, definitely.
For me, there's 3 actors here. They're all men, actually. John Mitchie, Billy Hartman and Forbes Mason, who I recognise. One from Coronation Street, one from EastEnders, and one from The High Life.
Yeah.
I don't recall anybody else, to be honest. However, saying that, I thought there were some really strong performances out of them. I felt Emily Joyce was quite endearing as Stephanie Jeffries. She looked the part.
Yeah.
Of that character. She felt like she wasn't too professional, even though the character was she was a lawyer, wasn't she?
Yes, she was.
Of that ilk. However, she came across as just being normal and comfortable.
Yeah.
And it's more relative. I could relate to it. I mean, I'm not in that profession.
No,
However,
of course not.
she was more accessible than someone who was closed off. But I'd say that for most of them, I felt perhaps Emma Noakes gave... I think this is where the 2D comes in. It's a Miss Scarlet acting.
Yeah.
She was an influencer. I mean, she did it fine. Very much influencer-like. However, it was all very much one note, and I think that's down to the writing, not necessarily.
Yeah,
down
and
to
also
the performing.
you don't know if it's been directed in that way as well, do you? You know,
It could be.
It's a combination of all, maybe.
I think the Harriet Godwin character was a little. I can't remember now, but probably a little twee, little wet, little. I think that was the actual character,
yeah,
though.
Definitely. I think, totally. I suppose this is where underwritten comes, because an actor can only act as much as the words they're given, and if there's only so much they
can do more without words.
But I don't think they could have done much more with what they'd got in this, in the sense of there wasn't that many moments that they probably.
I think this is why I took a shine to Stephanie Jeffries, because she was actually the only one playing the game, which was written by the Harriet Godwin character.
Yeah, totally.
So she was sat there. She was engaging with the actual.
She was very central to the production in a way. She was always there.
I think she should have been.
Yeah, of course.
I don't think she was, but I think she should have been, because she was trying to get people involved with the actual storyline, and I can understand the reason why that character was written like that. However, the rest of them didn't particularly want to partake. But she, at all times, went back to this. I say the script. She went back to the booklet of the actual game. The game.
I think paperwork. For me, I felt that some of them were, pretty much all of them, were glued to the same spot all the way through the production.
Oh, I definitely felt that. Especially with that character on the phone being the influencer.
Yeah.
It was very much, you saw the phone before you saw the person, the actor.
Yeah, I think as well, it's like, just to explain, there was one sat on the sofa, there was one sat in a chair, there was one that sat on another chair, and there was one that was just pacing around a lot. And I'm not so necessarily naming names.
Yeah, Jack Fleming was the one pacing around, I believe.
I just felt like they were glued. And it was like we were going into semicircle acting, where we step forward, we say our lines, and then we disappear again. You know. Yeah,
and we have said this before. There were stock Cluedo characters, I'm afraid. You know.
Yeah.
Harriet Godwin, Reverend Green, Jack Fleming, Colonel Mustard, Stephanie Jeffries, Mrs. Peacock, Paul Goodwin. He would have been probably Professor Plum.
Yeah.
Candida Jones, Miss Scarlet, and Inspector John Rebus. Not necessarily Mrs. White, however. Would have been the butler, or whoever it was.
And the chef that we didn't see.
Might be Mrs. White. Is she? Yeah, she's a chef in the game, not in the film.
Yeah.
And she's a chef in the TV series. Well, I think we're done a death here talking about that.
Moving on to our next segment, as we say, What the Tech is this?
Technical aspects, Richard. Technically speaking, I would say, about the tech, it was a little underused. I don't think there was much sound effects that they could have implemented.
No.
The use of the stereo and the music there was very subpar. They could have done a lot more with projections, perhaps on the canvas of the paintings,
or even TV screens.
TV screens,
instead of,
yes. Which, however, they would have done it. Even on the stage above the door, they had those oval round things. Now, what's the point in them? And had it have been something different, or something where light could have come through, you could have exposed the light in the hall. That could have been flickering, or something could have gone on. Well, I mean, if it wasn't written, it wasn't needed. However, it makes me wonder why they're there on the set. Even though we're talking about tech now. Everything's just discombobulated.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, there was no sound effects for when somebody fell down and died upstairs. There was no...
It could have been a thud, yeah.
Yeah, there could have been a thud, there could have been something, there was...
But I think they're guessing that particular person fell down before technically the play started.
But I suppose it was very hard to work that out, because the first half felt like it was most of the evening, and it maybe missed some of those transitional bits that would have helped make it more intense, because at the moment I suppose they wanted you to keep watching the whole first half to try and make it intense or feel that, but you just didn't get that. You didn't get any sense of anything getting worse. You just got almost a flat line all the way through of these are the people's lives. And I do, like you say, I do think it was underused. I think they could have had more sound effects and more things that would have helped.
Can I just ask you then, do you feel that there's far too much lamps and lighting on stage rather than it it being about the lights off stage in the Larrakin.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we're looking at a room that is a front room, sort of dining room, quite a large townhouse room. But
there's 12 lamps over 12 paintings. Then you've got 4 lamps either side of the door, and you've also got 4 lamps on the side.
But the lamps on the paintings, in a normal house, at your own house, you wouldn't have that
13,
many.
Because there's one in the alcove as well.
You wouldn't have that many museum lights on top of every light picture in your own house.
No wonder got all the lights, because the walls are black and the dark.
But you wouldn't need the lamps, because that would be creating enough light anyway. It'd be a very bright room, and I do agree with you on the chandelier. I mean, for me, they may have had 2 if that room is that big. They could have had 2, one above the table where the dining room is, and one above the living area.
Yeah.
I could see where they were going from, but it felt overlit a little bit. But you didn't see any transition in time. You didn't see it get to night time, a little bit like where we've seen very good use of day to night and stuff like that, where you can tell it's the evening. And I suppose Mousetrap, the same. You knew what time of day that was, just with one window at the back, with the changes of the light in the room and
the homecoming.
We had
exactly. The changing of the lights outside that was shown through the window.
You definitely knew it was night time, and the room changed, and it was well lit at the start. And then I think there was no levels.
But that's another aspect of bringing the outside in.
Exactly.
Because this was inside where you couldn't see daylight or anything like that. There was no way of bringing that external world inside.
But it's almost like the
grills. Any use of
the grills above the doors. They could have been
grills.
Well, the I don't know what they are, but they look like big ventilation grills. They're like decorative pieces above each door.
They look like hats.
Yeah, but they could have been. They could have let light through. They could have created.
That's what I said earlier. So you could see through and see like the whole light or something.
And it's almost missing, maybe a window in one of the flats or something that that.
Why did we need the other door, really?
Well, I mean, I was going to talk about doors, to be honest, because there was one moment where somebody went upstairs off stage left and came back stage right, and you're thinking, where are these rooms leading to? Because
Yeah, but that was scripted because that was reference saying, I just wanted to see if I could get through to this room another way. And he could. But then, ... where did it lead?
It led nowhere, because there was not enough disappearances of people off stage to set them up to be the murderer. It just didn't feel like, you still didn't learn that was a part of it was another red herring that didn't feel part of it.
Imagine watching Noises Off with all those doors.
Exactly.
And it's a farce, and no one went through any of the doors apart from one character.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And they just used the one door.
Yeah.
What would be the point in the rest of the doors?
Exactly, wouldn't. When you have so many setups, and I know I'd say that a production should leave you questioning or wanting to research more, but this left you questioning what actually happened and what the point of the whole production was a little bit. Now,
I'm glad you've said that, because I think that leads us seamlessly into our next segment now, because I don't think we've got anything else to say about the technical side of things.
No.
Other than what I would say is it's quite a nice theatre. The Queen's
Theatre,
lovely
theatre,
Hornchurch, lovely theatre, lovely little set.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I would not be put off by going back there.
No, and I think one thing we'd like to say, we are being quite critical on this one,
but I've got to be honest.
Totally honest. I mean, we have reviewed Jekyll and Hyde, which is, in a way, this is like Jekyll and Hyde, because Jekyll and Hyde in production was so much.
Do you think
different?
Darby got the Jekyll and these got the Hyde.
Well, I just feel
I don't get where you're going with this.
No, I was trying to say that.
Sometimes you get a good one, sometimes you get a bad one.
That's what I'm trying to get at. Yeah.
So, Ladies of Letter, Sheila's Island, same company that did that.
Yeah.
One was a bit.
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
and one was really good.
Yeah, it's not. What I'm trying to say is, you see one production, one hits the mark, one doesn't necessarily hit the mark, and I think that's what I'm trying to get to. That's where this. I don't think I need to say more.
I think it's wise.
And now it's time for our Rewind Rewatch.
Richard, which part of this would you like to rewind rewatch, if any? Because you've got to pick something. I'm sorry, but them's the rules. I made them. Whilst you're deciding as to what you would like to rewatch,
it's a tough one.
It might be. It could be the whole first act. I don't know. I think I would not like to, but if I had to, I would watch I can't remember what bloody happened. What bit was funny?
Okay, I know what I'd probably if I had to pick a moment, I'd probably say the
I'd also like to point out that
sorry.
I'd rewatch some of the. No, I can't. There's nothing I'd want to rewatch. Them's the rules. New rules apply. You can.
Well, we don't
you
have
can
to
take a
rewatch
pass.
anything, do we? You know.
No, I said you had to because them's the rules. But now the rules have changed because I can't even think of which one we want. I'd want to watch again. There's
I
nothing
think
that
I'm
stands
struggling.
out.
No, yeah, I think it's.
It's all a bit of a mess.
Yeah, I can't really pick anything that would stand out. Sorry.
I would rather watch Red Ellen again.
Don't go there. Really?
I think I would. More stuff were going on in that.
Wow.
However, on a separate issue, the writing of the jokes, they were quite clever. They were good.
There were some funny moments.
Great use of dialogue there.
A good look at this is a good edit. This is.
Moving on to our final segment, as we say,
Call this a show?
So here we are, Richard. Let's summarise how we feel about this play.
I mean, personally, I think it just needs work, and it could have been so much more.
In terms of the script, I think there could have been a lot more, like I've said, a lot more use of the external world inside, a bit more gameplay. This is called a game called Malice.
It's like
who's Malice? What's Malice? And what's the game about?
Yeah, and you set up so much, before you see it. You think it's going to be on edge, and you feel like it's going to be intriguing and exciting.
I've come away from this not gripped.
No.
My questions are: what's the point?
Yeah.
Why did they do this?
Yeah.
And I still don't know anything about the characters.
No.
I still can't remember what the twists and turns were. So there's definitely something wrong. It's not strong enough for me for this to be a masterpiece of theatre, a masterclass in whodunits, shall we say.
And you've got the promise of being there, but when you've got juggernauts like the Mousetrap and like things like in that way,
I feel this is just resting on the laurels of Ian Rankin as an author.
Exactly.
I'd just also like to point out, with the reviews that have come in on this, that we have from The Guardian, Rankin is a master storyteller. So they've dodged the bullet about the actual play. Rebus is an outstanding creation, says Sunday Telegraph. Again, dodging the play. Britain's #1 crime writer, Daily Mirror. Again, dodging the play. Britain's best crime novelist, the Daily Express. It does make me wonder when people advertise plays, when they don't put the review of the play, they put the review of the writer. Because just because you've written something great, you can't transfer those bullet points to something else which is brand new. Because it doesn't mean that what you're going to watch is going to be great. And we've seen quite a few of these, like Wicked Lady, brilliant reviews. We need to start calling them out. They shouldn't do it like that, because it's false advertising.
Yeah.
So, Richard, can I have your scores then, please, for Rebus, a game called Malice, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being a gasp-inducing murder and 1 being a gasp-inducing coma? What's it going to be?
I'm going to give this a 5 because I feel it was down the middle and the aesthetics were there, but other than that, yeah, it's a 5.
What aesthetics?
Pathetics.
I'm going to give this, unfortunately, a 3.5 from me. I can't find anything to rewatch on this. I mean, I thought I scored Cluedo really badly, but compared to this, even Master, this just falls straight down the middle. I wouldn't watch this again. So, what sound effect will you be choosing from the following? A complete train wreck? Tumbleweed? An audible shrug of the shoulders? A slow clap? A pleasant applause? Or a standing ovation? What will it be?
Tumbleweed.
I'm going to go for Tumbleweed as well.
So there we are, that's our discussion of Rebus, a game called Malice. We hope you found it insightful.
If not, entertaining.
Coming up over the next few episodes, we will be discussing The Beekeeper of Aleppo,
The Verdict,
and I take another trip to the West End soaking up yet more theatrical delights. If you'd like to get in touch, email us at upstagedownsstagepod@gmail.com. You can always join in the chat to share with us your views of a production.
Also, make sure to follow, share, like and subscribe to all our channels so you get every episode the second it's released. And we hope you join us again for another instalment of
Upstage Downstage.
A splendid dinner party concludes with a game created by the hostess. Have you finished picking your face? So I can see the screen. A splendid dinner party concludes. It's like Victoria Wood sketch. Try to move out of the way. Like Equal and Dukes.
His overalls in the way.
A splendid. We finished breathing. A splendid. Suspects, clues, and red herrings. Not herrings.
It's like noises off.
Yeah. The pilchards.